What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cult of Recreationalism podcast. I'm your host today, Nathan Morris, and we are here with Sage Burgener. Welcome, Sage.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sage,
I
so I
like
got a
that
little.
little intro music, by the way. That was
Thank you.
classy.
We're going for like a little vibey, get people in a good
Yes.
mood to talk about stuff. So, um, I got an intro here, Sage. Let me know if I did too much or if I didn't add enough in here. So,
Okay.
Sage is a mother, a strength and conditioning coach, a weightlifting and long distance runner now. She's been involved in Olympic weightlifting for over 30 years, been coaching it for almost 2 decades, and most importantly, she stays rad.
Ooh,
Uh-huh.
not too much, just the right amount. I love that.
Perfect. Yeah, that's kind of like, it was funny. I was going through your website and it's like, she has been involved in Olympic weightlifting for 30 years. And it's like, I don't know many people that can say that.
I know. I feel very lucky because it was just introduced to me basically in the womb, but we'll say growing up in my dad's 2-car garage, I was just surrounded by it because we would have people come in from all over the world champions, coming train, and I just wanted to be in the mix, and I was the youngest out of 4 kids, and all my brothers were doing it. So I just had to be doing it too, be out there with everybody. So it's pretty cool to say that you've been involved in something for so long. I mean, I don't ever remember it not being a part of my life, which is really cool.
Yeah. I didn't realize you were one of 4. There was 4 kids running around like with all these Olympic level athletes. That's
Oh,
really.
yeah.
Do you have any good memories from that? Like crazy stories that like someone coming in and it's like who actually, let me rephrase that. Who was like the nicest person that you remember from that?
Oh, man. Well, I don't ever really think that anyone was trying to be super nice when they were there. Everyone was just trying to like throw down hard
Mhm.
in the gym. But it was just like, I just remember we always had such good quality people there. You know, now that I look back, I'm actually super nostalgic about that time because that was just like really gritty training in this kind of dusty old garage gym. And everybody was just there because they loved to train hard. And there was no, phones out, cameras, nothing. And people were doing just absolute savage stuff. We were doing 1 rep or 20 rep max back squat, and people were going off to the side like throwing up and then coming back in and throwing down again. I would say there was definitely some people that made like pretty big impacts with just the way that they trained. But again, everyone was really cool to me. If people weren't sweet or kind to my dad's kids, they would be thrown out very quickly or just wouldn't fit in with the group. So everybody was just super high quality.
Yeah. That was, I don't know. The reason I threw that out there was there was a long time ago. I went to, it was an affiliate owners dinner. It was like the 2014 CrossFit Games. And I didn't own an affiliate at that time. I was just there with a friend. And we met Jesse Burdick. And he was just the nicest guy. He's like, hey, like, what's your name? Like, Nathan. He's like, well, how you doing today? I'm like, good. And he's like, well, what was good about? Like, he like
Yeah.
legitimately wanted to know. And it always stuck with me. And I just think highly of him because of that. So
I know. It's people who just take the time to really be inquisitive and actually do care about what you have to say. It's really refreshing.
yeah. What was it like growing like did you know you wanted to stay in the weightlifting space growing up in that environment, or was there ever like I don't want to be a part of this, I want to do my own thing, you are kind of a rebel. But
Yeah, I feel like I never really strayed very far from Olympic weightlifting. I think that I really loved it. Also, my brothers were really big role models to me. And specifically, my oldest brother, Casey, was one of my huge role models growing up. And so I watched him be very successful in Olympic weightlifting. And I watched kind of the path that he took to get to the Olympic Training Center and perform at a very high level. And I think there was a large part of me that wanted to be very similar to him. And so I always kind of knew that I wanted to stay in weightlifting and then explore like transferring high school the same way that he did his junior year, so he could go to my dad's high school and train twice a day. And so I took the same track as him and then try to get into the Olympic Training Center or a collegiate program for weightlifting the same way that he did. So I always kind of knew. And I didn't even go through like a rebellious phase where I felt like, I don't want to do weightlifting. You guys force us to do it. Because we did always have to weightlift. We had to be in at least one sport and we had to be Olympic weightlifting. But when I talk to my brothers about it, I don't feel like any of us were really forced or had to, be put in power like, hey, you got to get your training in. I think that we started to see the benefits of doing it very early in the way that it helped us in the other sports that we were doing. It's kind of cool that like we were doing stuff that not a lot of other kids were doing. And so I think there was a element to that that was very intriguing. Like, oh man, this is so natural for us, but this isn't like a common thing. And the Burners, we all like to be special in some way, and we all like to be doing something that not a lot of people are doing. Um, and so yeah, I always loved it, and I always wanted to be in it, and I never had to be forced to train.
Yeah. Did your parents, they were like, hey, you gotta go get it in, or they're like, was it more about, hey, don't forget, like was it like direct encouragement, or was it you need to do this, or how did that work?
I think that the only time I remember ever being like, I don't want to train was if I wanted to go and hang out with my friends and they're like, no, you need to get a training session in. But that is very few and far between. I do feel like there was a couple of times where, it was more of a little bit of like a guilt trip of like, you're not going to get your training session in, like, how important that is. But now that I am a parent, I totally understand why. Like they really wanted to encourage that continuous strength building. But I think that the fact that there was always people at our house, I always wanted to be in the mix with everybody. So it wasn't really like direct encouragement or guilt or like, you have to do this. It was more of like, well, this is what everybody's doing. This is where we all are. And it always sounded fun. Like there was heavy weights dropping. You could hear that from anywhere in the house. There was yelling. There was passionate coaching. And so I think there was just always a part of me that would end up out there because I wanted to see what was going on. And then I just ended up jumping in on the mix.
Yeah. And so have you with your kids, do you kind of require the same thing? Like, hey, we gotta make sure we work out every day, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I really try to find the balance. My son and I have an inside joke where he feels like I always say, well, if he would have been training more consistently, then this wouldn't have happened. And so I definitely think I'm in their ear a lot about the importance of lifting weights. He is finally sort of at that age now. He's 11, he'll be 12 in November, where he is starting to get more passionate about other sports and he wants to be good. And so he's seeing the benefit of putting on a little bit of muscle. I see him like flexing to the mirror and stuff, which is hilarious to me. And so I think he's starting to buy into
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He does like the abs and then he does like the trap thing, which
Uh,
is so funny to me. Um, so I have been in their ear forever, but they do come to the gym with me almost every day. And I try and put the whole like, well, you can't go on electronics until you get your lifting in, and then you got to read, and then you got to do your homework. But lifting is always a part of that. Or CrossFit, it's kind of the same thing for us. Um, so there's definitely like requirements that need and responsibilities that need to be done. And weightlifting is just one of those. So I think it's just kind of a norm for them where they're like, okay, I got to get my homework done. I have to read and I have to get a workout in. That's just like where their brain goes to now, which makes me really happy.
that's cool. That's I do some training with I don't have kids, but like training some of them. And like I don't know if you've ever taken like the CrossFit Kids course, but the one of the big things they instill in that is like burpees should not be a punishment. Burpees should be fun. So you never pun it like it's like, nope, you have to go sit down over there. You don't get to do burpees with us. And it's like just
Exactly.
teaching that kind
Yeah.
of mentality.
For sure. I remember he went through a phase where he was giving me some attitude and wasn't being super coachable. And I made him finish the workout. And then I was like, you don't get to work out for the next week because working out is a privilege. And one of those things is being coachable. And as a coach, that's my number one requirement for an athlete is coachability. And so I tried to kind of shift it to like, this is something that you get to do. This is not something that is just like, oh, anybody gets to do it. It needs to be earned. And I think that really shifted his perspective too. But yeah, no, I've never made it a punishment ever.
Yeah. That's what other sports is he playing?
He does wrestling and jujitsu.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so he's super into wrestling right now.
That's so cool. We were talking about like we've had Kalipa and Chris Spieler on the podcast, and we've been talking
Hmm.
about he's like CrossFitters. He's like when they like a lot of CrossFitters you see in like jujitsu and mountain biking are like the two things that
Oh,
he's like,
yeah.
and it's just because it just translates. And for me, I started doing jujitsu recently, and it's just I love the technical aspects of it.
Yeah.
Similar to why I really started gravitating towards weightlifting early on. Like, but now my barbell is fighting back. It's like I'm trying to do something specific with it, but it's trying to fight back. And it's not just gravity, it's coming at you from all angles now. So,
Totally. Yeah, no, I love it. I think CrossFitters start to transition into more of like active meditative movements, right?
mhm,
So, like mountain biking, you have to be so focused on what you're doing in that moment. And so your mind is constantly working. In jujitsu, your mind is constantly working. And so that sort of active meditation, I think, becomes very appealing because you have other responsibilities in life, and life is hard and stressful. And so to be so engage mentally with something and to sort of escape from all of that for an hour, couple of hours, I just think is so appealing for CrossFitters nowadays, from what I'm seeing.
yeah. And you're kind of finding it too with ultra running, right?
Yeah, I would say part of it's active meditation, but the other part is it requires a lot from me mentally, but that's why I do it. So, it does.
You're good. Well, let him stop first. There you go. Um, Uh, where was I going to go with that? Oh, but so like with the ultra running, because I wanted to ask you about that. You don't often hear of weightlifters. Usually there's like, no, you idiots can go run over there, do your thing. We're going to have our chair next to our platform and sit down between lifts. So
Yes.
what drove that and what kind of got that started for you?
So I was absolutely very old school style Olympic weightlifter where I was like, yep, I get out of breath, like walking to the refrigerator. We sit down in between sets, we eat gummy bears in between sets, and it's like we throw down super hard on one lift and then you go and rest. And that culture, there's a lot of pride and kind of humor surrounding that culture. But then 5 or 6 years or so ago, I moved back to Fellbrook. I had kind of moved all over the place. And I got introduced to my coach, who's now my boyfriend, Charlie McAvoy. And he really changed my whole kind of perspective and methodology surrounding fitness, which there's not a lot of people who come into my life where I'm like, wow, like this just blew my mind with your thought process surrounding things. And I think I was like very open to learning, but without really knowing it. And I remember telling him like, hey, I'm kind of a coach now. I don't really like lift much anymore competitively. I don't really CrossFit more competitively. Like I really want to invest and be a coach and invest in my athletes. And he was like, that's bullshit. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is the natural progression, man. Like, this is what you do. You're a competitive athlete. You do all your time and you be selfish, and then now it's time to be selfless. And he was like, absolutely not. And so he kind of started to slowly show me through his programming and just through the way that we would train, just what an increase of athleticism as a whole can do for your strength. And with that came introducing a little bit more running for me, where I pushed back very hard. I was like, nope, running is horrible for my hips. It still, like, I've had pretty bad hip issues since I was young in weightlifting. I'm like, running is going to be absolutely horrible for my hips. And I'm trying to get strong right now. Like, I believed everything there was to believe about running. Like, this is going to take away my strength gains. It's going to do all the things. And he was like, listen, just run a mile a day. Okay. That's all I'm asking. You can do it as your warm up. Just run 1 mile every day and just see what happens. And it did take me being open to the idea that it could be something different than what I thought it was going to be. Right.
Yeah.
Because that's always a huge part of growing anyways, is the willingness to be open to some sort of different thought process. And so I started running every day, and because I'm me, it was like, all right, well, maybe I won't just do a mile every day. Like, maybe I'll do 2 miles today. And then I was like, okay. And then I would lift and I'd feel really good. And like my strength wasn't going down. And I'm like, okay, well, let's up this a little bit. I'm going to try 5 miles today, which was just like absurd to me. Like 5 miles. Oh my gosh. I've never even thought about running this before. Like, this is going to be so far. And then I went and did it. And I was like, dang, I feel pretty good. And just fast forward, I ended up doing a 10-mile run. And then the next day I came in and my knees were hurting and my hips were aching. And I started warming up and I PR'd my back squat. And to PR at the phase of your life where you've been lifting for over 25 years is like pretty crazy, right? Like, I don't really expect many PRs at this point. I do now, but back then I was like, what? I just PR'd my back squat? Like, this is wild. And so then I really like bought into it. And then Charlie started getting into doing some more longer runs. And I'm very much that person where, like, if somebody's close to me that I love is doing something, I'm so curious about it. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could do that. And so began my journey into like the ultra world, where all these people that I was starting to see were going and doing ultras, and I went and did my first 50K, and I'm like looking around at all these people that look so different than CrossFitters, who are like the most pristine, optimal, like human specimens in the world, and they're so jacked and their bodies are so beautiful and they're doing all these crazy things. And then you go and you see these ultra runners and they're just like these average looking people, and you're like, okay, well, if that person can do this, then I sure as hell should be able to do this. And they're completely breaking me off on the trails.
Yeah.
Right. And so that just like totally made me curious, like, what is happening? And then I realized just how mental the sport is. And it really comes down to your willingness to suffer, not for 3 to 5 minutes like we do in CrossFit, but for the span of hours and hours and hours. And I'm all about like trying to master the art of suffering and get really good at it, because I'm not very good at it. And so ultras really exposed me in that way. And I am still not great at running, and I'm not great at suffering for long periods of time. And I really want to be. And so that's where I'm at kind of right now in my ultra career.
I remember seeing a while back, I think it was maybe your first, was it an ultra or was it a off-road marathon, or what's the longest one that you've done?
I've done two 100K, so 62 miles.
Dang. How long did each of those take you?
I think those were around 17 hours.
Okay.
So, and it's kind of funny because I wouldn't even define myself as an ultra runner. I would like that does and this feels like I'm being an imposter when I say that. I definitely am like, no, I'm just an athlete who does ultras and I CrossFit and I Olympic weightlift and I strength train and I, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't say like, even when I said, oh yeah, I am a ultra runner, I'm like, well, I don't really feel like an ultra runner. I just feel like somebody who does ultras. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a good like comparison. Like, oh, I just casually do ultras. It's like it's a different thing. It's like, oh, I'm kind of into coffee. Like,
Right, and you can't kind of do ultras because they take so much, and there are
yeah.
people who do. I mean, you could casually be, in my opinion, you could casually go and do 50Ks or 50 milers with pretty
Mhm.
minimal running training, especially trail, right? Like when there's hiking, I mean, you can kind of casually do that. But when you start getting into those like higher mileage, you can't casually do that. You have to be like pretty all in to be able to go to the places that you need to go with those longer distances.
Yeah, I did before we started recording, I told you I did two marathons while I was in college, and it the first one I really didn't train for a whole lot. Did not do great. But it was my knees were so it was more just they weren't ready for the impact, that sustained impact for that long.
Totally.
And then the second one, it was just school got crazy. I was in college and everything got crazy, but I put in miles. Like my body was more prepared for it. And then it was a couple friends and I, we all did it together. So like the four of us, we actually had the exact same time at the St. Louis Marathon. Like when you go on to like the
Oh,
results, it was all four of us had because we like made sure we crossed the line, the start at the same time. Then at the finish, we're like, all right, so get in a line. We're gonna try and do this, and we all had the exact same
oh,
time. It was
that's
pretty
so
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people I would way rather go do a 50-mile trail run than do a marathon on the road. Road
Yeah.
marathons are just like so brutal, and I have so much respect for people who go out and do a road marathon. I mean, I feel such a difference when I run on the road, just that higher impact. And also, it's not easy to run for that amount of time. So much respect to road marathoners for sure.
Yeah. A couple years ago, I remember it was a Sunday and I had gone out with some friends the night before. And so a little hungover. And I got up and I
Carb
hadn't like,
loading.
uh hadn't worked out for a few days either. It was one of those, I was like, I've just been a human piece of garbage the last few days.
Yes.
I need to go do something. And I was like, I'm gonna go from my house. There's a loop where I can go like out. It's all on main streets, but it's exactly a 5K from my front door back to my front door. And I was like, I'm gonna go do that. And I'm putting on my shoes and I'm like, this is not gonna be good. And like I know what I'm capable of from back in the day. Like the 800 was my race back in high school.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, and so it's like I know what I'm capable of. And it's like I'm not gonna get anywhere near it. So I threw on a weight vest. So I was like, okay, if this is gonna be slow, this it's gonna be because of this vest, not because of the
Right.
bad decisions I made the last few days. And I ended up putting up like a somewhat decent time, and that was a Sunday. And then like the next Saturday, I was like, maybe I'm gonna do another one tomorrow, like just to test it again. Like I feel good. I was good this week. I ate well and all that. And then it was like almost a year. It was like every Sunday or a Saturday, I would go for a run in that 5K. And like obviously it like plateaued and I didn't
Yeah.
improve. But like it's like I knocked like a minute off like the first time that I did it, and then it just kind of kept like, okay, cool. I'm keeping pretty consistent miles here. Like this is fun. So
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, we actually just went to the Carlsbad 5,000.
yeah.
I actually saw one of your guys' booths up there, which was pretty cool, but they were breaking it down before I got to say hi. But I was thinking to myself, like, man, I would rather go do a half marathon than go run a 5K because that race just looked so intense. And we watched the elites, and I was just like, I got literally goosebumps watching these elite level athletes run that 5K. I mean, that is a hard distance because you cannot let off the gas for 3 miles. Like that is so tricky.
Yeah, and they're running like sub fives the whole time. Like it's
Hey,
just
yeah. I
I've
think
done one of
it
those
was
ever. Like
uh I think the top guy averaged to be a 4:48 for 3 miles.
that's faster than my 1 mile back in my prime when I was 18. Like that's
Right.
crazy. So
Amazing.
yeah. Okay, well, so you're doing the weightlifting coach. Well, actually, what does weightlifting coaching look like for you now? Like,
Hmm.
I want to, we talked about Sage the athlete. Let's talk about Sage the coach a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so I still do remote coaching for athletes. So people come to me specifically to try and improve their Olympic weightlifting. Um, they are initially a little disappointed that I make them do things that are going to make them be a fit Olympic weightlifter. Similar to the way that I program for Mayhem Burgener Strength, there's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily see in like a conventional style Olympic weightlifting program, which was very in line with what my methodology is about. It's increasing our athleticism in order to be better at Olympic weightlifting, which is an extremely athletically demanding sport. Right? Like you got to be so athletic to be a successful Olympic weightlifter. So why do we keep, you know, honing in on the snatch and clean and jerk only without addressing the things that make us more athletic that are in turn going to make us better at snatching and clean and jerking? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
And so I coach my remote athletes, I program for Mayhem Burgener Strength, and I host my Bad Bitch camps, which are these 3-day fitness retreats. Is kind of like the weird way of saying it because it doesn't feel like a retreat in any capacity. It's a very challenging weekend. And people come, and yes, we do a lot of Olympic weightlifting, and I coach them on their technique and teach them and throw all my knowledge on the Olympic lifts onto them. And we also do a ton of other forms of fitness as well in those 3 days. I also coach 1-day seminars for affiliates, which is always really fun to be able to just come in for the day and just, I mean, they're so mentally exhausted by the end of the day of just trying to like throw in as many cues and education as possible on the Olympic lifts as well.
Yeah. It's always funny to me. Like we had Jared Enderton lives nearby and came over and did a snatch clinic at my gym the end of
Mm-hmm.
last year. And it was so funny because people like they wanted to learn. We had a good turnout for it, but the amount of people are like, why am I so sore from a PVC pipe of like just holding these positions? They're like, we do this with a barbell all the time. Why is
I
this so hard?
know. I know. Yeah, affiliate owners will reach out and they'll be like, okay, well, we want to kind of do like some snatch and clean and jerk, and maybe we could do like a lifting session at the end of it. And I'm always like, okay, well, we can try. We'll see how everybody's feeling. And everyone is just so smoked by the end of
Mhm.
the day that maybe we'll get to lifting like empty barbells, 65 to 95 pounds or so, but people are so trash that there's absolutely no heavy lifting most of the time towards the end.
Yeah. What so going back like the bad bitch camps, what do those it's 3 days. What all are you covering in those 3 days?
Yeah, so Friday is typically a lot of Olympic weightlifting with the snatch. So I'll kind of just get into the fundamentals. I'll cover a lot of the things that we talk about in our Brugner strengths courses, our level 1 courses, and just really like help break down the movements for people because it's always so fascinating and interesting to me how often we do the Olympic lifts in CrossFit, but people have such little knowledge about what is actually happening during a lift because CrossFitters are typically pretty athletic people. And we have so much that we have to be good at that people get thrown into a workout that has a snatch or clean and jerk. And if they move pretty well, the coach is not really going to go into too much detail about what is happening, why it's happening. Like, why do you fail over the bar? Why do you want to think jump more than hit the ball off your hips? And so that's kind of my opportunity to really ask questions like, do you guys know why this is happening or why we're doing this? And that's really fun. People love getting into the nitty gritty with the Olympic lift. So that's sort of Friday. Saturday is a little bit of everything. So we CrossFit, we run, we do more Olympic weightlifting, and I just basically show them at the end of the day, look at how much you just accomplished in one day. Because I'm trying to change their perspective or their standard for what they're capable of doing in one single day of training. It's also great because a lot of the women that come are moms or they're just busy in general. And so they never get the chance to just like fully dive into a full weekend or full day of training. Like I constantly say throughout the weekend, you have nothing else you have to do. You have nowhere you have to be. You have no one else you need to take care of. You have nothing else to do. So just enjoy being here with no one else needing any single thing from you. And I just think that a lot of chicks would come looking for that fire to be lit under their ass. They always say, like, I haven't been able to train as much as I want. Like, training has definitely taken a back seat. I just need a fire lit under me. And that's sort of my basis that I use to plan out that weekend. And then Sunday is always really fun. We go and we do like a Q&A with my dad. We drink some coffee. People can just pick his brain. And I mean, that man has so much information and knowledge and experience that it's fun to just be able to sit there with him and ask him a bunch of questions. And then we do like a very old school Mike's Gym style of training where we snatch and clean and jerk and front squat, heavy single for the day with my dad. And people just get to throw down, even though they're tired, even though their bodies are sore and exhausted, we still get to go and lift in front of Coach B, which is always like so exciting for them.
Yeah. I feel like the lifting with Coach B and going to that garage for a lot of CrossFitters, that's like going to the ranch for some people, or that's like going to like Mayhem
Yes.
CrossFit. Like it's
Yes.
bucket list items. So
Oh,
I know
yeah, for sure.
yeah, I know it's on mine because I've talked to Sean from because we're then it's I don't know when it's coming out, but we can talk about like there's going to be a Coach B documentary coming out that Bubs is helping do. And I was telling he's like, yeah, we're going to launch it hopefully like spring or summer. And I'm like, cool. Like when we launch it, like we should go like get some stuff with Coach B and like and I get to go, right? Like I get to go.
That's
I want to go to
awesome.
I want to go
Yeah.
lift in the
Yeah,
garage.
so I'm like a part of that, right?
Uh-huh.
Pick me, please.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I have had a lot of people ask, like, hey, can we do a destination bad bitch camp? Like, would you want to come to my gym? I have a ton of women who'd be so interested in something like this. And while I totally want to do it, there's also a part of me that's like, well, part of the magic of the weekend is getting to go and be in that gym and be on that property. I mean, my mom just has created this beautiful property with her yard and the house and everything. It's like that's such a pivotal part of the weekend that there's always a part of me that's like, I don't know, I think it should stay here, but then you want to reach more people. So I'm not really sure, but it is such a magical place. Like very magical things happen at Mike's Gym for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go lift with the geezers or work
Oh
out with the
yeah.
geezers.
I wouldn't really expect much of a workout. They mostly just like shit talk and talk about politics the whole time.
Drink some coffee. Yeah, get some
Yeah.
kettlebell swings in. Yeah.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's pretty funny.
Hmm. What's okay, so that you got the bad bitch camps, you have your coaching and all that. What's like professionally, personally, what kind of goals are you working towards right now? Like, is there anything big we can expect from Sage Burgener over the next couple of years or coming up, or what are you looking to do?
That's a good question. I think that it's very dynamic. I'm a very dynamic person. Things kind of ebb and flow for me, but I definitely want to explore this world of ultra running and integrating more strength and conditioning into that ultra world and that ultra community. And my boyfriend and I actually just launched a program called Ultra Strength. And it was born out of this past year has been like such a huge year for us, a year of change. He got diagnosed with cancer. And that was like a whole journey. It was very sudden, very extreme, like a total whirlwind. And now we're on the other side of it, and we're both training for a 100-mile race in June. And so I attempted the 100-mile race last year for list of reasons that we don't even have to go into because they'll always just sound like excuses. So I just say,
Yeah.
hey, I DNF'd. If you want to know the story, great. If not, doesn't matter. But I DNF'd that race. And so I learned so much from that. DNF means did not finish.
Yeah.
I learned so much from that race that we started sort of thinking like, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently to complete this race? And he just had major surgery to get rid of his cancer in November. And so his thought process and our thought process has been, how can we rebuild you from zero and have you ready for this race in June? And so those two stories together, we're like, we have to create a program for this. Like, this is what we believe in. And you have two categories. You have the strength and conditioning people who never want to run, but are curious about what would it look like if I added some running in. And then you have the runners who are like, yeah, we do strength work. Like, we do dumbbell work, we do like accessory work, but they don't ever do heavy lifting. And we know the benefit of the stimulus that heavy loading on the body can do for you in terms of durability of the body, right? You can't just do strength training with light weight and expect to have the most durable body that you possibly need. You have to do it all. You have to run, you have to do the accessory work, and you have to do the heavy lifting. And so that's where this whole program kind of was born, was how do I improve from a failure, and how do you go from zero to get ready for a 100-mile race? And so I'm just like really excited about this. This is kind of something that I feel like I'm at this point in my life where all of my passions are starting to get a little bit more focused into one thing. And I really want to explore that. Like, I just had my first ever ultimate bad bitch camp. So you have regular bad bitch camp, then you do ultimate.
There's
And
levels of bad bitches.
yes. And the ultimate was doing just that. I merged the worlds of CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, and ultra running into one weekend. And it was just like the most incredible weekend ever for me. And so that's sort of where I see my vision and going from here. Is I just want to keep exploring that. The camps are my passion. They're what I love to do because I get to take everything I believe in and love and pour it into these such willing, badass women from all over the world, which it literally doesn't get much better than that.
That's cool. I want to go to bad bitch camp. That sounds like fun.
I know. I have a lot of dudes. It's like, okay, well, I could be a bad bitch if you just let some dudes in there. I want Charlie to run an all male one. I mean, men are dying for this kind of weekend as well, but they don't want to come and learn from a female or listen and be yelled at a female all weekend. Maybe they do, which is a pretty cool guy, in my opinion. But it would be cool to have a male presence because we get into like very deep sort of emotional stuff that is pretty specific to women, which I think would be really cool for a guy to get into the mental side that's specific to men and the challenges that men face on the regular.
Yeah. the one of my coaches at my gym, we had, especially like with COVID and all that, it was like sport, you just couldn't like do, kids couldn't go to as many sports and all that kind of stuff. So a
Yeah.
lot of my members were in the burbs of Denver. So we've got a lot of families and like, hey, like my junior high to early high school kid, like they wanted to bring them in. And it was so cool seeing, especially the young ladies that came in, being coached by Jess, because she's just a very fit individual, like looks the part, broad
Mm,
shoulders. It's one of those like, it actually, I'm going to brag on her for a second. So she teaches at a local police academy. She does their physical training component and like does that year round every morning. And she had this guy came in, he's coming in to be a police officer, and he's like, she's wearing a tank top, and he's like, do you mind putting on like a sweater or something? Like, it's really intimidating how big your shoulders are. And she's like, you're gonna be a cop.
yeah.
I'm 130 pounds. You're 200 and like you're intimidated by me? Like it was,
Yeah, we need to address that, please,
yeah.
before you go out and try and protect our streets.
Yeah. But it's been so cool seeing her work with 14-year-old, 18-year-old girls and
Totally.
all that. And like you see like that shift of like being a strong female, like there's nothing wrong with that. And like and
Right.
seeing like some of these girls like progress up, like we've got one, she's in college now, but like she comes back and just like throws down with us every time she comes home. It's like one of my favorite things. So
It's amazing getting to redefine kind of what these teenage girls' priorities are for
mhm.
sure. And that's so awesome that she just takes that role very seriously, because you can make some very impactful changes at that age. They are just so impressionable. So I always love hearing that.
Yeah, it's been cool. Like just there's her, there's I would put you in that camp also as well. A lot of like just the higher level CrossFit Games athletes of like what beauty is, and like obviously I'm a white guy talking about this, but like
Oh
um
yeah, you're smart. You see what
it's
happens.
but it's cool seeing that like that being reframed in society,
Right.
and like that there's nothing wrong with having strong arms or strong legs or whatever it is. So
Right.
for me it's been cool to watch because I've definitely over the last like 10 years of like, I feel like CrossFit really blew up like the 2013 games, like around there. So we're
Totally.
a decade out at this point and just seeing how that's changed across so many people. So
I know. It's amazing.
yeah. Um, what else? I had another question on here for you. No, that's kind of what I had. I wanted to we kind of I had a list of things and we kind of talked about all of it. Um as we went through, we kind of hit on some of the subjects I want to talk about. Um is there anything else that you wanted to share or anything else big coming up? I know you talked about the camps and all that.
Yeah, no, I think we pretty much covered everything. Yeah, got that big race coming up, which will be really fun. Got some camps coming up this summer, which will be great. So yeah, life is good. And I
Cool.
really appreciate you guys having me on here. We love Bubs. Bubs always takes care of my dad, takes care of me. So we're so thankful to you guys for putting out such amazing, clean, quality products.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like we're happy to have you guys be a part of the Bubs family. So yeah,
Hmm.
when we were putting together like we just started doing the podcast and we were putting together the list of names. Like you guys were on the list like immediately of like we want to definitely
Oh,
talk with them. So
that's
um,
awesome. Thank
cool.
you.
All right. So Sage, if people want to learn more about you or Bad Bitch Camps or any of like the programming that you do, where can they find you? Where can they find all that stuff?
So they can go to my website, sageburgener.com. I have all of the information about remote coaching, about 1 day seminars, about the camps. Everything is on there. And then if they want to learn about the ultra strength programming as well, ultrastrengthco.com. We also have that website with a bunch of different programs or running programs that people can check out, which is really cool too.
Cool. And then I'll make sure to, in the description of the podcast or the YouTube video, wherever you're listening or watching this, I'll make sure to drop links in there. I'll throw your Instagram in there too, so if people want to connect with you, they can. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan.
yeah, absolutely.
Now
Yeah.
I got the dogs.
You're right. Dogs are back. So, guys, as always, thank you for listening. You can find the Cult of Recreationalism podcast on podcast services everywhere, YouTube. If you want to connect with us, just look up Bubs Naturals anywhere, whether it's Google, social media, you're going to find us. And while you're there, leave a thumbs up or a 5-star review. Every little bit helps, and it helps us grow this podcast and grow Bubs. So, Sage, thanks so much for coming on. And then stick around after this. I wanted to talk to you about a couple other things, but thank you for coming on.
Okay, thanks.